Once you activate your license, how do you get started? And that's what we're going to cover today. You really just need to do a couple things. You just have to add a car just to get up and going, add a car, add a track, add a setup, and then start adding sessions. Once you have some sessions, you'll have some data to play with and things to work with and start analyzing to help really get what you're getting at is how do I improve my performance? Right, is record keeping is crucial, right? There's a lot of factors that play into it, so this really does a lot of that record keeping for you and makes it really simple to actually get back at that information. But let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is start a car, and there's just like a lot of things. There's a couple ways to do that too, right? There's you can go into the car menu, add a new car, or you can simply just here the little shortcut, add the little click on the little quarter midget icon. So let's talk about cars just for a second here because it actually will make a difference in how you divide things up later. My recommendation is to every car has to have a unique name. My recommendation is to name it for the class you're running. If you have questions ever about what am I supposed to put in here, these little question marks that show up here are designed to give you that information, and it will tell you right here. You have to enter a unique name for this car. Okay. So what I typically do, let's just say we're running senior Honda this year. I'll typically do that. I don't even fill in the class and division. Say you have a red car that you do. Let's say it's red. Once you start jumping between classes the next year or even mid-year, right? Sometimes we just say, look, we just want to throw a new motor and join a different class. It makes it a lot easier to separate everything in terms of how you deal with it later on the back end. So this is why I recommend it. And let's say midway through the season, you all of a sudden switched cars. You said, you know what? And I've done it before. This car's lighter. We're just going to switch it to the heavier class just because we want to, shave a couple pounds out so we can add weight where we want. So I would recommend doing something like that, red, or if you did it to the blue one, do it like that so you can keep it separate. That's one way to handle it. But this is how I typically do it. And again, at the end of the day, the biggest criteria is just each car has to be uniquely named. Okay. So now we added cars, just that simple. And that's really all the information a car holds. Setups belong to cars, and that's an important distinction here because you will find those setups in here as you go along. But let's talk about adding tracks. We'll get to that. So tracks, right, are obviously pretty important. Let's say this is our home track. The only thing, again, you need here is to give it a unique name. Everything else is optional. Surface type is just a way for you to do this, and this is all configurable in your settings. Your surface grip, just record keeping, so you remember when you look back and say, what did I do with this? How, what was it like? City, state, and zip are optional. Latitude and longitude are important. Every time you run a session, you will automatically pull weather, and it will pull weather based on your track, the lat and longitude you have in your track, and the timestamp, obviously, because when did you run it, right? Time matters for weather. So we need to get a lat and long. Google Maps. Okay, now we'll go to my home track, which is Elko, and that's right down here. We just zoom in. There it is, right there. Okay, this little thing. I think there was an accident on the track. So you can just right click on a spot in there, and you can just click on that, and it copies it to the clipboard for you. What I typically do is just paste it right in here. Now it will tell you if you click on here, must have 5 decimal places. Okay, it's pretty important for lat and long to get decimal places right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So copy, paste, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now you have your lat and long. Turns are just a convenience. When you want to analyze your lateral load transfer through the different phases of the turns, that's here's a convenience. We'll cover that in another section, another video, but just know that it's a convenience. You don't have to do it. This is typically all I do. Sometimes I do city and state just so I can remember where it was. But and down here any notes, so you can just put whatever you want in there. Just something for you to remember. A lot of times, as I've traveled, I'll put a lap distance. I mean, it's pretty crucial as you travel around, especially relative, to know how long is that lap. Relative to your home track, so you can kind of estimate gears and things like that in RPM. So a lot of times I'll put that right in here and say, look, the heavy Honda line was like 310 feet. And your rookie line, was probably like 305. Right. It just so I can remember later on. So there's handy references for the notes. But again, at the end of the day, all you really need is a unique name, and highly recommend to take advantage of what this gives you is put the lat and long in there, and then you add it. So now you have your home track right there. Okay. The next thing you're going to want to do is add a setup. And again, like always, setup, you can go here, add a new setup, or you can go to the little wrench and gear icon. It says add a new setup, right? And you have to have a car because the setup is for a car, and we'll call this test, right? A lot of these are pre-filled because these are settings I have set in settings, which you can do to make a lot of the things. Like typically for people with multiple cars, you're going to run the same make of car. Like I run all Bull Riders. Some people run all Stanleys, so you can swap parts all the time. Where you don't want to run one Stanley and one Bull Rider or one AFCO, right? You just end up with this hodgepodge of parts you don't want to deal with. So a lot of times, a lot of these things are pretty standardized because the same car. Let's just say 3.5, 4.5. You can put your lag and lead. Here you put your gear ratio in that you run, and that can be overwritten at when you run on the track, and we'll get into all that here in the sessions. But here's your corner information. Let's just put 75 and just put 110s all the way around. We know it's not right. Here, let's just say Senior Honda, let's just say 3s, right? 75, 110. We know we're running A35s. Some places run, I run asphalt, so we pretty much run A35s everywhere. We know this isn't right, but let's say we're running a 32 short. And let's say we run locked on our rear hub there. Okay, center of gravity, you don't have to fill that in. Okay, and then you add. So now, if you look under that car, you'll see there it is. Here's our setup. Okay, this is not right, obviously. We don't want that. We could talk about some of this. When you look at what this is giving you, here are kind of your overall stats right there on this column here. Here's your weights. Here's kind of differences between your front and rear. And the thing I pay the most attention to is probably this right here, your roll stiffness, right? The end of your car with the greatest roll stiffness will receive the most weight transfer. So we spend a lot of our times, right, playing with loose and tight. And one of the ways we do that is playing with our springs. So this I've always found to be helpful as a gauge of how tight and loose I am. Once I get a baseline set, I can come in here and say, okay, I know this car likes about a difference of 12 between the front and the rear. Well, I'm at 14. That makes me tighter because there's a bigger difference between the front and the rear. So the bigger the number, the tighter you are. Quarter midget cards in general are set up for greater front roll stiffness because the spring separation on your front and your rear on the front is much wider. On a bull rider, it's 4 inches, 4 inches wider right here, and that's so we're not, we tend towards oversteer. But this is a gauge of that. So once you find a good baseline, you can use this to say, okay, how am I comparing to my baseline? Right? It's very handy to know, am I getting tighter? Am I getting looser just in terms of roll couple distribution? Right? Here's where your engine teeth would show up. Here's your center of gravity, which we haven't calculated. We'll get into that. This is we didn't add corners, so let's add that in. Let's just do our ride heights. Let's just give ourselves a little bit of rake and tilt. Let's say front left, let's say 1. Front right, 1.125. Rear left, 1.125. Let's say 1.5. Okay. Now it calculates your rake and your tilt in 4 corners, more or less. Your front tilt going from your front right to your front left, and same thing for your rear, and your rake is on your left side is going from your rear minus your front, which is a positive number, which means you have more rake in the back. I've always found this to be helpful. Some classes handle rake and tilt much better than others. Right, you get into faster, heavier classes, you can't set them up so loose. And here's kind of a corner summary. That air pressure is really what you set at the time you threw it up on the scales. Let's just say we did 8 all the way around. You can tab through this just like I'm doing. Okay, and there you go. And that's kind of a setup. There's a little more to it at times, but I mean, this is just recording what we normally do. The next thing you want to start doing is start recording sessions. And before we do that, let's set up a season and talk about seasons just a hair. As you go from year to year, you're going to end up with a lot of information over here, okay, especially in your sessions. And a lot of times you might not want to see your previous year. So seasons are a way to deal with that because we run in seasons. We run race seasons. And if you go back actually to the home, you can see right here it'll display what your current racing season is. And it's saying not set because you never added one. So if we go into our season manager, it's empty like it should be because it just started. So let's add one. Let's say this is the 2024 season. Your current one will default all of your sessions. So whatever the one you're currently running in, mark is current. And if you want to see the sessions in the tree, you just click on that. Once you're done, you just hit save. Okay. Once you refresh this, it's going to tell you set your current to 2024. Now, when you add a new session, when you take your car and you run it at the track with that setup, so let's say Senior Honda, test, track, home, you see the seasons already defaulted in. You don't have to add it every single time. It's just a convenience. So let's call this a test one. This was preseason testing, right? We just now this is important, the date time, because we are at that track. It will pull the weather as of this time here, which is your local time. Your speed, your RPM, this is all whatever you want to fill in. You have notes here. I typically fill in speed, RPM, lap time, lateral acceleration. I pull it off all my my Micron 5S in Race Studio. And if you go to the website on the blog, there's actually a blog on how do you get this information out to add into here. And I give you, honestly, the profile I use when I open up Race Studio. And we can get into that in a different video, but let's just say we ran, this is senior Honda, what are you running? I forget anymore. Maybe 36, maybe a little, I think maybe a little faster, maybe 37. Let's say you did a 6.512. Let's say you ran 5,900 RPM. And let's say, I don't know, leave that alone. This is just if you, something you want to track later, and this is configurable. This just helps you say, okay, what were the track conditions? Was it cold? Was it hot? Was it dry? It's just something to help you later. If you had any problems, oversteer, understeer, were you scraping? Just something so you can do that. And a lot of this you can just put in the notes too. You can say, look, look pretty bad. Okay, you can just put that in there. And I actually use these notes a lot to help remember things later. Let's talk about this. The exclude from analysis this is actually pretty important, right? A lot of times you're going to go back and you're going to look at your data and you're going to say, look, where is my optimal RPM? Where is this or what is that? And a lot of times you're going to have ones you don't want to include because it was just an anomaly. You just weren't running well. Like here, look, I was scraping. It looked pretty bad. Times were not good, right? So you really don't want to include that in things because it'll just throw everything off because it's not normal. So you can do this and this will exclude it from all of those. So let's talk about setup adjustments because these are very, very handy. You're on a normal race day, right? In the morning it's cold, warms up throughout the day, and we spend a lot of time checking our RPM, adjusting your routine stuff just to deal with the fact that it's warming up and we're gaining RPM, and our tires can't always take all that. So here you can write in your setup overrides or what they are. It's not worth creating a new setup for every little adjustment you make just for normal race day stuff. So you can come in here and say, look, I adjusted my front track width a little bit. I adjusted my rear track width. I raised or lowered my front roll center to that, rear roll center. Or here's the gear ratio I ran. This does not calculate gear ratios for you. You need to enter this in manually. So you enter your teeth, your engine, your axle, and your ratio. When you go into analysis, it will automatically use these values. So you don't have to go like, oh, well, what did I do there? It will automatically substitute those in. So you don't have to think about it. And for the tire people who always, right, check your tires, right? And we always look at our tires, right? But some people will come in and record the temps and things like that. I always record air pressure here. Right, but I don't do the temps. I look at the tires, but some people do. You can record that here. You can record how much tire you think you have left, and for those of us that want to keep track of what was our tire size at the end, right? For stagger, right? You can record it right here too. So once you do that, let's just say we didn't do anything here. We hit add. Okay, and now it tells you right here it's pulling weather. In a second, a pop-up's going to show up. It might not show up in here because it's not in the main screen, but it will show you that it successfully did it and it's done. So come here, and there you go. So right now it's raining, not a great race day. And you can see down here, it actually pulled the leading weather half an hour from 5 hours before. We ran at, what is this, 10:40, and this is 6:10, so yeah, like 4.5 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, or however you want to say it. But you can see what the weather was like and how the temperature progressed before you even got into it. That's pretty handy to know, especially when you weren't there all day or whatever. You know, what did it look like when I was getting into it? A quick thing about once I enter my basic information, how do I start actually using it? And the basic way to do it is looking at what I call your performance summaries. It basically just a bunch of tabular information you to get a lot of the pieces you need. So let's say I'm looking at my senior Honda. Here's my home track. Okay, how did we run? So you just right click on that and you go to your performance summary. And if you look here, you're going to see it gives you every session and critical information about that session. You know, your lap time, your RPM, your speed, whatever you entered in, right? And if you want to go to that session, you can just click right on there and it'll take you right to it. You can get all the details. If you want to go back, you can just right click back. If you want to check out your setup, you can go right there to it. Okay, you can go back. You can alternately get it by going to your car, and any track you run at will have a performance summary underneath it, so you can just go back to there. If you alternately want to see how did this setup perform, right here you can go to the setup performance summary, which is every place you've run that setup and how it looks. It just gives you another way to slice those same sessions, right? Just so you can see what you need to see. And other ones we'll get into analysis where you're talking about, you know, analyzing patterns with your scatter graph, things like that, which is kind of the next level of looking at it. But this is where I spend a lot of my time, I find, once I race, to say, okay, it's heating up. Where do I want to go to from here? I come back and look at my historical performance at that track to say, okay, how well did we do, and what were the ratios and any overrides? Like, say for example, let's run another session here. Test. This is actually pretty important to practice. And let's say, I don't know, let's just make something up. Speed 37.2, lap time 6.548. Let's say 59, 58, 50. Don't worry about that. But in this case, let's say we drop the tooth, right? Let's say we run a 36, 27, and off the top of my head, let's say that's a 36 and a 27 in a Honda. That's got to be about, I don't know, 4.98. Let's just say that, right? So if we go to our performance summary, here it shows you overwrote that. Since there's nothing set on the setup, let's modify the setup, and let's say we run a 36 and a 28, and let's say 5.10. Right. So now when you come here, you can look, and now we have our temperature, and you can see in this session we actually overwrote the gear ratio. which is very helpful to know that, yeah, we didn't run the 5.1, we actually ran a 4.98. And you can see it got a little hotter just in the little bit of difference of time here, half an hour. And that's the basic gist of the performance summaries, which I find incredibly helpful to manage race days.